And I want to welcome you to something to talk about. We've kind of got some folks online here and some of us here. And something to talk about is a program we do 2 or 3 times a week here, mostly online and occasionally in person. And so Bill has agreed to be our guest speaker today. I want to start by thanking Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which is a sponsor of something to talk about. They offer assisted and independent living and memory care up on Rolling Bay. And you can find out more by giving them a call or scheduling a tour, 206-594-1010. And we always like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water who have lived here since time immemorial. We honor them and we are grateful for their stewardship of these lands and waters, and we can learn from them. Bill is a passionate student of economics, business, science, and technology. Your objective in life, it says in your bio, is to be a great husband. So we'll check on that later.
To one.
And a good friend to many. Your background includes 2 degrees in business and 1 in law. You were at ground zero of the computer revolution, which makes you a perfect speaker for us today to talk about artificial intelligence. And you currently have a website, epic.land, which I'm hoping you'll tell us a little bit about. And we're going to talk today about artificial intelligence, which is really a topic we hear so much about and understand so little about. So thank you very much for taking the time today.
Great pleasure. Pleasure to be here. And seems like I know half the audience here. So this is great. Well, within the next hour, I hope to take you from what level you're on right now as far as knowing anything about artificial intelligence to knowing more than 95% of the population. So this is going to be a fast ride. Hold on, buckle up, and be ready. And read. Yeah, because it's not advancing.
There you are. I was right here checking the other side.
It's not advancing.
Okay, so
Right.
there we go. This is our,
Oh, there we go.
You need AI.
there we go.
Now my panic is over. In any teaching kind of thing, one of the rules is that if you come away with 3 things, then you've probably got as much out of the presentation as you can. So the 3 things I'd like you to come away with is an understanding of organic, digital, and large. So pay attention when you see those. They will usually always be highlighted. So that will help you there. I'd like to start with a quote from Descartes in 1673. I think, therefore I am. And this is one of the foundational quotes of philosophy in general, and might be able to say, sort of set forth the intelligence revolution. Then we got to the artificial. However, a more recent philosopher had a better quote, Yogi Berra, the future ain't what it used to be. And that is very, very true. Okay, first a definition on artificial intelligence. Made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally as a copy of something natural. That doesn't do much for me, but that's what the thing is. And intelligence, the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. That can be practical, creative, or analytical. And we know things like intelligence quotient, IQ, emotional quotients, social quotients, adversity quotients. Also, there's a hierarchy of intelligence. It starts with measurement, facts, data, information. Artificial intelligence is kind of up at the knowledge part, and humans were still dominant in the wisdom part. But before I get into the artificial part, I want to get into the organic. This is one of those words that I had up there. Organic wetware. That's our brain. That's this little thing that sits between our ears. And then there's digital, which is software and hardware and is artificial. First, wetware. Our senses are our inputs, just like computer inputs. Our brain is the physical hardware that we use. Our mind is the processing or software equivalent in the digital world. And we have consciousness, self-awareness, ego, soul, however you want to define that. And that's what the digital area has not really got yet. So that's some of the distinctions. We really don't appreciate our mind as much as we should. Our senses developed literally over billions of years ago. Our sense of taste, which is a chemical interaction, began 2 billion years ago when various cells and things kind of would go away from each other or would come together. Sight, about 570 million years ago. Smell, 500 million. Hearing, 375 to 275 million years ago. So we have been a long time in the development stage to get where we are now. And not only that, it takes us 9 months of gestation, 21 years, give or take 10 or 20, for maturation. And then we have about 60 to 70 years of functionality. And then when we depart, we have a total memory loss. So everything up here goes away. Now, that's not a particularly good feature, but that's the way we are. Also, in terms of senses, we've got fairly limited senses in terms of what we can see in the visible light range between the gamma ray and the radio waves is a fairly narrow band. Likewise, in hearing, we've got elephants and dolphins and things that have hearing capabilities on a much broader range. And as we know, cats and dogs do too, except cats ignore us. The brain itself is about 3.3 pounds. It operates on electrical, chemical, and some physical changes as well as far as synapses. Processes at about 60 bits a second, which is a pretty slow processor, but it parallel processes, so it goes in many different ways. Therefore, it makes up for the slowness. Our memory has about 2.5 million gigabytes. Put that in perspective, the IRS database of all your tax returns is 150,000 gigabytes. So we have a fair amount of memory. We operate on 350 to 450 calories per day, unless you're a chess champion engaged in a chess match, and they can go to as high as 1,500 calories. So your brain is a muscle. And so if you want to lose weight, just think more and burn more calories. We burn about 1,700 watts a day, which is the equivalent of a 40-watt light bulb. And neurogenesis says use it or lose it. Now, what is going to be coming is the digital to organic and biocomputing. And actually, biocomputing is what I'm most fascinated about, because it's not even on the radar scale right now in terms of people talking about it, but it'll be 10 to 20 years in the making. Right now, they've already demonstrated that 1 gram of DNA represents 100 million movies. Now, I tried to get my head around 100 million CDs of movies. And so I talked to my good friend Gemini, and Gemini calculated out the thickness of a CD disc and how tall 100 million CDs would be. That comes out to 100 miles. So imagine a stack of CDs 100 miles high. Now, you could lay that down and that stack would reach to Olympia and back. And that's the equivalent of 1 gram of DNA. There is 1 gram of sweet and low in here. If there was 1 gram of DNA in this package, it would be 100 million CDs.
A long string.
Yes. So that is the power of what's coming in biocomputing, but it's 20 years away easily. So the other important point is technology is agnostic. It really doesn't care. It's people that make the difference between whether it's used for good or used for bad. Now, this is what's called the hype cycle. Gartner is a computer projection analytic firm. They do analysis of what's going to be the big things over the coming years. And they're kind of the premier in this. And they have what's called a hype cycle curve. And the first part of the hype cycle there on the front end that goes up is called the peak of inflated expectations. And the big blue arrow shows you artificial general intelligence. Now, this is from 1922, 2 years ago. At that time, Gartner, one of the best predictive agencies in the world, was predicting that it would be more than 10 years before artificial general intelligence happened. And in July 2022, the world changed with ChatGPT-3. And now, 1 year, 2 years later, they're at the top of predicting it's at the top of the peak of inflated expectations. So we've had a year and a half of here's what it's going to do. It's going to take over the world. Oh my God, it's going to do all this. Well, we are about to enter the trough of disillusionment. When you begin to find out that all the things that everybody said it was going to do, it ain't going to be so. And so we're going to go crashing down that trough over the next year or two, and we're already beginning to see it. And then it will level out somewhere and be reasonable. The other point in digital, here's one of those words again, is that I want to get across, is that if you look at the change in intelligence, human mental capacity hasn't changed in thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. We are what we are, not changing very fast. Most of our world that we live in is linear, and that we plant a tree and the tree grows and it gets a little bigger, but at about the same rate every year. The thing that we don't see or understand is exponential growth. And that's where my 25 years in the computer software industry, we saw exponential growth, Moore's law, where things get smaller, faster, cheaper every year, very quickly. A great example of exponential growth is the Human Genome Project. This was a 14-year project. At the end of 7 years, they had sequenced 1% of the human genome. Now, if you said, okay, you got another 7 years, took you 7 years to get to 1%, are you going to make it in another 7? And most people would say no. But the one bit of information you don't have is they were doubling their capability every year. So if you start at 1%, the first year you're at 2%, year 2, 4%, year 3, 8%, year 4, 16%, year 5, 32%, year 6, 64%, and year 7, you cross 100%. And that's exactly what happened. So that's exponential growth. And that's what we're seeing with artificial intelligence.
Excuse
Yes.
me. Is that a formula, if you will? When the term exponential growth is used, is that formula one that's always true?
No, it'll always be a different percentage. Like Moore's law is every 18 months, things double. So it can be a different thing, but it's the percentage is changing. Linear growth is the same, 5% growth per year. This is multiplying. And a good example of that is that mobile phone users took 16 years to reach 100 million users. Facebook took 4.5 years to reach 100 million users. ChatGPT, 2 months. So that is exponential change. The same here is oh, good. This is a change in generative AI from Midjourney over a 2-year period of time. And you see how crude it is over on the left and how now it's beginning much more realistic and you're reaching photorealism in the period of time. So that was the capability of this particular AI. The other thing is that we have historically measured AI against human benchmarks. Well, we have a slight problem. It's past all the human benchmarks. So now we're developing new benchmarks that can figure out how to measure its changes because we've literally hit the ceiling here. This is a chart that goes back 15 years, actually. A gentleman by the name of Ray Kurzweil, who I would rate as a prophet of technology, just not a predictor, but a prophet. And 15 years ago, he published a book called The Singularity is Near. And in that, he had some charts on the growth in supercomputer power over the years. And his ended at where those blue lines ended. Well, I took his chart and re-updated it for where we are today. And that's where the blue arrow is. He is absolutely right on. And he has been for the last 15 years. So we can expect that to continue. Also, this was a chart he did as to what $1,000 would buy you in computing power. And right now, $1,000 will buy you roughly the equivalent of one human mind. In the next 10 years, 15 years, it will buy the equivalent of all human minds. So again, this is exponential growth. Now, there's 3 types of artificial intelligence. The first is narrow, and it performs specific tasks. Everything we have today is essentially this. And the question is, when will we reach general artificial intelligence? And that's where it has an ability to learn and perceive, understand and function as a human, and multifunctional capabilities equal to a human. And there's some say we're already there. Kurzweil's prediction is that in 2029, we will reach this point. Then the next one is superintelligence, which is exceedingly better at everything. And this is what's called the singularity. And Kurzweil's prediction on this would be 2045, when the singularity occurs, of when there's a merger of digital and organic intelligence together. And that's what my website, The Land of Epic, talks about, is that I propose that we will be able to have a DNA modification that adds to our neocortex that allows for an organic connection to the cloud. So anyway, I'll give you the link to that. So if you want to stay awake at night, it's a good way to do it. And as far as knowing when we get to the place where artificial intelligence is more like a human, it's going to be hard to tell because we have a potential to see humanity in everything from Neptune, the god of the sea, to a totem pole that represents other gods and things. So our mind kind of does this automatically. So they're trying to put in place some tests and things that would be more objective. But here is an example of Japanese care robots. And these folks will feel an affinity for these robots that may exceed how they feel about their kids. So it's going to be a real hard one to figure out. So what is AI? It's made up of 4 main things. One, it's the cloud computer servers. These are big football field warehouses of computer boards. And that's what you hear about as far as the energy and things like that. And in fact, many of them are what's described as lights out. And lights out means they don't even have lights turned on because there's no humans in there. And the joke is that a server farm only needs two things to take care of it, and that's one, a man and a dog. And the man is there to feed the dog and take him for a walk and clean up after him. The dog is there to make sure the man doesn't touch anything. So anyway, those are server farms. Large language models and machine learning and internet are the other three, and I'll talk about each one of those. Also, to put this in a perspective, where has things come over the last 30 years or 25 years? Back in 1997, Garry Kasparov was beaten as the world chess champion, if you remember that. An IBM team from Deep Blue put together a computer program that could beat him at chess. Chess, in terms of complexity, is 10 to the 123rd. That's 10 with 123 zeros behind it is the level of complexity. 2011, Watson from IBM beat the Jeopardy champion, Ken Jennings. And this was a much more difficult thing because it involves natural language, understanding the context of questions and data and information. In 2016, AlphaGo from Google beat the Go master of the world. Now, this set Asia on fire because we don't play much Go in the United States, but in Asia, it is big. And its complexity is 10 to the 360. So 360 zeros behind 10, far more complex than chess. And this was a real revelation, particularly in China, and it was what launched them into their major AI effort. And I would say those are narrow intelligence things. They're doing calculations, but they're not really thinking. The Go's getting kind of close to it. But since then, there's two games, Diplomacy and Stratego. And in Diplomacy, there are 7 players that are communicating via email. So they don't talk to each other or see each other. And Cicero from Facebook and this is basically a game of strategy modeled on World War I of the countries and people lying and, I'm going to do this, and then they stab them in the back and stuff like that. Well, Cicero can consistently win at diplomacy. And one of the interesting parts, its main strategy, is it keeps its word. So it's a kind of a curious statement on humanity. Okay, now here's large language models. Now, what this is basically vacuuming up every piece of information that you can get. Anything that's been written, published, put on the web, videos are being added in. And then all of these pieces of information are broken down into what's called tokens, or basically the words and how they go together. And these now are hitting 1 trillion tokens. And what's been found is that the bigger they get, the better they seem to get, but they also have some problems that come with that. But in putting together a large language model like ChatGPT-4, it takes 5 to 6 months of these server farms working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, scraping this information together, and costs approximately $150 million to run one of these programs. So it is not cheap to develop a large language model. Also, they're growing very fast. As I said, they're hitting up toward 1 trillion tokens now. They came a long way. And here's another example of an exponential curve. It started down at 0.1, and now you're up at 1 trillion. The other area is machine learning. So you've got all this information, and now how do you get anything of value out of it? Well, there are 3 types of learning. The first is unsupervised. The kid, I used to smoke in the 8th grade, and that was unsupervised learning. And so that's an example of that. Supervised learning is more like your school, and that you've got structure and programs and things like that. And then you've got reinforcement learning, which is you get up, you fall down, you figure out why you fell down, and you get up again. Eventually, you don't fall down. And interestingly, this is the only learning that AlphaGo had. In the AlphaGo program, they gave it the rules of the game, which are very simple, and the objective to win. And then they turned it off and it played against itself billions of times. And it learned strategies that have never been seen before. So this was pure reinforced learning. So there we have the four things. We have, oh, this is, I gotta get the time. We've got cloud computer server farms, large language models, machine learning, and then all of this talks to itself over the internet. And now we've reached what I call the battle of the titans. Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Apple, the big kids are here and they're playing to win. This is the capital spending on AI development. And the left chart shows you Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, and Meta spent last quarter, $53 billion. So that's the amount of money that's going into the R&D on these things. And then over venture capitalists in 21 hit a high of over 125 billion in terms of their investment. So massive amounts of money going into this. Likewise, the data centers, those large football warehouse things, have gone from about 500 to nearly 1,000. And then I've just got the revenue of NVIDIA. NVIDIA is the company that supplies over 80% of the semiconductor chips for this. They have got a lock on the market that is only to dream about. And they are now at $30 billion a quarter. So serious, serious money.
Are they in America?
Yes, actually in Silicon Valley. My daughter used to date somebody that worked for them. The breakup is. Okay, Chat GPT-3 just is an example of one. There's Gemini, there's a bunch of Bard, there's a bunch of others. But it was launched in November of 22. It uses 175 billion parameters, and it's supervised and reinforced. Its main thing, 10 months it took Facebook to reach 1 million users. GPT-3 was 5 days. One I've had a lot of fun with is DALL-E from OpenAI. Now, this is an image creator. And it's the name comes, I don't know if you remember the movie WALL-E, and he was a little robot that ran around picking up things, and Salvador Dali. And so it's a mashup of those two. But to give you an example, I was doing a presentation on cryptocurrency. And I put into DALL-E, make me an image of a Bitcoin miner named Electrostatic. And this is what it generated for me. Now, the surprising thing, this was the time, if you remember it, when the non-fungible tokens, NFTs of the Bored Ape Yacht Club were selling like for $150,000, and they were exactly like this. Now, silly me, I didn't go out and figure out how to make a whole bunch of money out of it, but I was just blown away when this thing suddenly popped out. Then I was doing another presentation for Heron's Key, where I live, and I put in a blue heron with a key next to a harbor style of Van Gogh. And bang, this is what I got. These are really fun to play with, and I would encourage you to sign up, and Mid-Journey is the best. I'll have a note to that at the back, but it is just stunning of what can be done. So some of the the most powerful parts, beneficial parts of AI are going to be in medicine and education. And that's where it's really going to make its name. And in medicine, just recently, last year, Google AlphaFold identified over 200 million different protein structures. That's in addition to the 1 million that we knew up to that date. That database is now being made freely available to over 1 million scientists around the world. It's free and easy to use. And out of that undreamed of tool is going to come an awful lot of drug discoveries. And because protein folding is the key to how you attack viruses and everything else. So this is going to be super huge. Another area is synth SR, and this takes the ability to take normal brain scans and improve them up to a T1, which is the best you can do, weighted images. And it's now going to give researchers a tool to understand real-time working of the brain. So we're going to be able to start mapping how the synapses work at multiple levels of the brain. So literally seeing into how we think, and that will be revolutionary. Number of medical devices, 39 were approved in 2022, and you can see the growth of them. So these are all sorts of different things that make our life better in terms of medicine. In terms of education, year and a half ago, there was a lot of talk of, well, we're not going to let students use this and we're going to do this. The horse is way out of the barn on this one. It's gone. And so we have got to figure out how to live with this technology, not how to prevent it. And it's going to be a tool that the kids of tomorrow or today need to help them learn. One of the best tools in this is ConMigo. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Khan Academy, but I've been following them for probably 15 years. And Sal Khan is an amazing individual. They've got thousands and thousands of short videos on every subject from 1+1 to linear algebra. And the neat thing about Khan Academy is that if a student's using it, it requires mastery. So you don't move on a C, you move on an A. You totally understand what's going on. And what they've found is our paradigm of moving students on at a C level means there's big holes in their knowledge. And in terms of math, about 8th grade algebra is when it all comes together, where this Swiss cheese knowledge has got so many holes in it that you can't get to the next step. And they did a research group in Palo Alto where they took an 8th grade class and they took the upper half and had them continue on doing what they had done. They took the bottom half and took them back to 1+1 on the Khan Academy. And it took them several months then to work through things. But they not only caught the upper half of the class, they blew on past them because these kids had mastery of all the math up until then. So it really proved that. What ConMigo does is it sets up the student with a personal tutor. And so they have a personal AI that learns how they learn and how they think. It will give them problems. It will not give them the answers, but it uses the Socratic method so that when they can't get the answer, it will ask them more questions that lead them around to the answer so they discover the answer themselves. You can also have conversations with historical figures. There is a Socrates that you can talk to. You can talk to Salvador Dali. Because all of these people have written so much, and then these are put into AI bots that then you ask them a question and they search for the relevant information and put that together. So you can literally have a conversation with Aristotle. Self-paced, infinitely patient, and it also reports back to the parents and the teachers on how the child is doing. Just an amazing program. I had a video that I don't think.
Hi, everyone. Sal Khan here, and I'm excited to announce that
Can you hear this?
Conmigo, our generative AI-powered tutor on Khan Academy, is now generally available. And this is especially powerful as we go into back to school, that if you have Conmigo, your student has it on their Khan Academy account, that they're going to be fully supported. They can ask questions, not just on their Khan Academy work, about anything that they see in their schoolwork. But it will not cheat, it will not do their homework for them, but it will provide support like a great tutor would. But it goes beyond what a traditional tutor would do. My background's in computer science, and using this with my own kids, I found it to be a better programming tutor than I can be. It also does things like academic coaching. It can actually give feedback on students' college essays. It can simulate historical characters. It can simulate literary characters. It can do creative exercises with the student where they could write a story together and your student could even talk to the characters in the story. Now, as a not-for-profit, our mission is free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. But we are having to charge for Conmigo. It is $9 a month. And we have to charge that because the computation costs of generative AI are actually quite expensive. And this is an experience, I want to be very clear, it's built off of the cutting edge AI technology. We're not skimping on any dimension of the quality. I think people are surprised by the quality of the math and how much we've been able to reduce some of the rough spots that generative AI has historically had. The guardrails that we've put in, not only does it not cheat, but you as a parent, if your student's under 18, can monitor what's going on, can be actively notified if anything suspicious is going on. So if you want to help support your student this coming school year in their academics and beyond, think about getting Conmigo for them.
It actually offers step-by-step instructions, but not to the point where it gives the answer to the student, but it guides them.
Okay, and there are already apps available that you can put on your phone talking to historical figures. And we are very close to being able to understand what other species are saying. There's a lot of work going on now in whales, dolphins, and crows, if you can imagine that. And I think when we realize that these other species communicate and talk to their kids and talk to one another, we are going to start getting a much different look of how we deal with a lot of these things. But the Achilles heel of AI, as I said, a year and a half ago, people thought it was going to take over the world. It's certainly going to change the world. It's got huge costs, as Sal Khan just mentioned. The costs of development are running $50 billion a quarter. It's got the price of the server farms, which are these huge warehouses that take up a tremendous amount of electricity. In fact, 2 days ago, it was announced that 3 Mile Island, the nuclear power plant, is going to restart, and it will have one customer, Microsoft. And they will sign a 20-year deal, and they need that much power to run these server farms. But there's one small itsy bitsy problem of spending $50 billion a quarter. There's no revenue model. No one has figured out how to make any money on this. So you only keep spending $50 billion a quarter for so long until somebody raises their hand in the back of the room and say, where's the payoff? And right now there's not an answer. There's blind faith that this is going to be a big thing. So from my perspective, I think we're on the verge of a big bubble collapse on this. So could come pretty quickly. There's another problem that I've termed incest. July 2022, when they are building these large language models and scraping all this information in is that all that information had been generated by humans. That is no longer true. Now it's also being generated by AI. And this is like having sex with your sister. I mean, it's not something that goes well as you go on, because it then corrupts itself with its own information. So this is a big problem that they're just beginning to recognize. Also, copyright. They went out and grabbed everything. Well, a lot of people owned what was out there and didn't like not being paid for it. So they got sued. And now there's a big push to scrape out what's not, or get rid of the copyrighted stuff so that they aren't infringing anymore. Also, they found that it has the biases of the people that had bias that wrote things. So how do you remove biases? And hallucinations are, if it can't put together an answer, it will put together an answer based on whatever it happened to think. In fact, there's one famous one of a lawyer that used it to write a brief, and it had cited cases that didn't exist. He was severely sanctioned, and law firms took a big step back on that. And then in terms of regulations, our legislators, politicians have finally woke up. I think that was the good news of 2022. Everybody got excited, worried, and everybody, in particular the political group, said, hey, we better start paying attention to it, and they are. I think maybe in time. Anyway, last 23, there were 25 new regulations passed in the United States. Europe, the United States is doing pretty well. Europe in total, and particularly the European Union, is doing very well. They've already got legislation in place on regulations for AI. And because they drive such a large part of the world, it's really causing everybody else to kind of fall in line with what Europe's doing. So it's coming. They're awake, and now we're talking about the right sorts of things. So this brings me back to not an old friend, but somebody I didn't know until I started doing this research, Ned Ludd. Ned was the guy that, if you hear the saying, well, you're a Luddite, Ned's the guy that caused that. And this was when the Industrial Revolution was just getting started. And England was bringing in all of these machines that were replacing what the weavers and the people were doing as far as manufacturing clothes. And it became very clear to them that these machines were going to replace them. So the thing that's not appreciated about the Luddites is they weren't necessarily against the technology. They were against the change in their lives. They were living in a world where it was interconnected, the work, the community, the family, the craft guilds, the village networks, townships, stability. Your son was going to be what you were. His son would be what he was. You knew what was going to happen. And they looked at these machines and quite rightly said, we're going to lose our lifestyle. And so with the centralized production in the name of progress, we got all of these factories that had horrific labor standards. We wiped out this whole community and lifestyle. And we are at the exact same point right now. We are going to have a discussion of what do we want in life? How does technology fit into that, or does it not fit into that? And I see over the next 5 to 10 years that this is going to be one of the major discourses that we have to deal with. Because just with what we're seeing already in climate change, we can't continue on our level of materialism. The world cannot support what's going on, and we've already proven that. So anyway, if you meet a Luddite, I'd encourage you to take them to lunch and have a good conversation. So we've got the three words: organic, we talked about wetware, your brain; digital, all of this computational power; large, the large language models, and all of that information gathered together. So some recommendations. One of the best news sources that I think you can get is something called The Conversation. It's a free email, comes out every day. It has 10 to 12 articles in it. They're very well curated, always topical, and very unbiased. And I highly rate it. Also, there's my website, The Land of Epic, and that's http://epic.land, that I put up about 7 years ago and walked away from it and have come back recently to update it. And I kind of was impressed with it. It's still valid, but it's a speculative fiction, which is another word for science fiction, on a post-singularity society. So when Ray Kurzweil said, well, singularity will be here in 2045, and we don't know what's going to happen after that, I immediately took that as a challenge to figure out what would happen after that. And so this is a speculation, not for me to be right or wrong, but really to give you ideas of what might be and to stimulate, hopefully, a lot of discussion. Another one, Grammarly, and I would recommend this. Let me see how to say this the best. As you get older, your writing skills fall off in terms of spelling, punctuation, and other things. And that then alerts your kids to the fact that you're getting older. And it's a, hey, you know, what are we going to do about dad discussion? Grammarly will prevent that because it not only does grammar, spelling, and punctuation, but also can reconstruct sentences so that they're much more intelligible. And so this will cover your tracks for another 10 years with your family.
Is that
And-
a website?
Pardon?
Is that a website?
No, it's a software that you download. And as you type or write, it will automatically give you suggestions on how to improve what you're doing. And I'd say 98% of the time I take what its suggestions are. It's just about beat the passive voice out of me. But anyway, it's cool. And it's hard, it's not expensive at all. Then you've got others that like Gemini and ChatGPT are your standard AI chatbots. I use Gemini that if I've got an area that I don't know much about, I ask it, tell me about this. And it will give me a 500-word thing that gives me a pretty good Cliff Note summary of what it is. Then you can go into Safari or Google search and get more details, but now you've got the outline. So these aren't one thing does it all. You want to use them as several tools, like then Grammarly will tell me if I'm writing it up on it right and things like that. Midjourney is an image generator that is replacing, I think, DALL-E. It's now rated as one of the best image generators. So, and I would encourage you to explore those and have some fun with them, because this world is here. And either you're going to live in it or you're not. And if you live in it, I think you'll find a lot richer experiences. You'll be up on things, you'll understand things a lot better. And that's it.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm guessing if people might have some questions, willing to take questions?
Yep.
Okay, I'll put the stop share on so we can then have the people from the Zoom land join us too. Also, anyone have a question they'd like to ask first? Go ahead. Yes.
You commented a bit on the negative side or potential negative side about misinformation becoming a part. Can misinformation or data of any kind be removed from AI?
Well, and I didn't say misinformation. I say AI produced information. So we're not pure human anymore.
Yeah,
We're a mixture, and they don't really know how that mixture is going to sort out, but they have this feeling it's not going to be for the good. And so now, actually, I just yesterday saw a software that I could add that would tell me when I'm using something that's been generated by AI. So that it would prevent me from carrying on that. It would also tell me when I'm plagiarizing somebody. We've had that for 20 years when I was at Ohio University. We had something that students had to input it into the computer system. It would go against a whole bunch of documents and tell me exactly where they had taken some quotes from. So it was great. But I got off track.
I use the term misinformation, but how do you, or is it possible to remove some?
A lot of very smart people are working very hard to make that true, that you can remove. Because it'll be a problem.
Question here from Cindy.
Yeah.
I'm asking a question from Cindy. What do you think will be the next big step in information collection?
Information collection. I'm not sure I understand that term.
Well, Cindy, you can take yourself off of your mute and ask, but I'm guessing that you were talking earlier about the challenge of getting fresh information and the idea that the information pool that the AI is using is being polluted by the fact that it's starting to consume its own information.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, I now that question's registering with me.
They think she might be in.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. One of the problems they've ran into is that once you have put in everything written about Shakespeare, that's it. There are finite limits on information. And once you've got everything that Shakespeare wrote and everything that anybody wrote about Shakespeare included, then there's nothing more to add to it. So they're hitting up against some of these walls. And that's where they're moving to add now videos and other things that take up more space. But we're still plowing new fields here, and we don't know how far the field is going to go.
Well, I'm guessing that the potential at some point when you talk about this is that we're going to get original research and original material that's going to actually not be derivative. It's going to be brand new because of the capabilities you're talking about. Lois asks, what careers will this technology create and which will it eliminate in the future? Any prophesying today, Bill?
Oh, boy. Well, it created a brand new job category a year and a half ago called a prompt engineer. And that would be a person that wrote the prompt in, the better the prompt is a question. And the better, more detailed your question, the more detailed will be your answer. And these folks became in very high demand very quickly. Last year, you could earn $200,000 a year working at home as a prompt engineer. This year, you're unemployed. So that's how fast it came and went because of the changes. I'm also a member of the Association of Professional Futurists, and there's about 1,000 of us worldwide that it's about half academic and half strategic business consultants. And these folks advise the UN and a whole bunch of countries and companies and governments. And there's more and more discussion of concept of universal basic income and this was what I alluded to earlier on the Luddite discussion. If all of the value of artificial intelligence is going to 5 individuals who happen to own the companies that are involved in this, we've got something seriously wrong with our economic system. And we've got to then figure out how do we reallocate wealth when working may no longer be necessary. And so those are some very deep philosophical questions to get into, but will fundamentally change our society. And so that's what I see that, okay, we're going to get the election behind us in the next month or two, but somewhere in the next year or two, these things are going to come out.
So Bill,
Yeah.
how do you keep up on what's going on in the world of AI?
Well, I probably read at least 10 different newspapers a day. And several publications like Wired Magazine and things like that, probably a half dozen of those. And I have some information news curation sites that I use that provide me with that. And it's it's getting beyond my ability to do it.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ray.
Thank you so much.